All right, so welcome book club members. Our choice for the month of May is Bishop Irenei's The Beginnings of a Life of Prayer. And today I want to welcome owner of Punks and Monks and Books based in California, Michelle Brown. And we're so pleased to have you today. And she is zooming in from the country of Georgia. So please tell us which monastery you're visiting right now.
Sure. So I've been here for 8 weeks now, and I've probably visited 15 monasteries, all over Georgia. And today we are in Signahi, which is just outside of Bodbe, and the Bodbe Monastery. And Bodbe is actually where Saint Nino is reposed, and we venerated her tomb today. It's actually my second trip here to Signahi and to visit Saint Nino, but my son and my husband just arrived 5 or 6 days ago, and so they hadn't been to Bodbe yet. So that's where we are today, which is in kind of the northeastern corner of Georgia. But where I've been most of my trip is in Ahakhalaki, which is on the border of Turkey and Armenia. And I have been under the discipleship of Metropolitan Nicholas, who is the abbot at Holy Trinity Monastery in Ahakhalaki, and that's in the southwestern corner of Georgia. So that's where I've been most of the time. But we've done a lot of traveling with Meope. So Metropolitan in Georgian, the title, the Georgian word for metropolitan is Meope. So that's usually what I refer to him as.
Excellent. Well, we're so glad that you had the time to speak with us about the introduction of Bishop Irenei's book. So if you could share with us a little background about kind of Bishop Irenei and the introduction, that would be great.
Yeah. So this book is actually one that I'm so glad y'all are doing the book club on this month, and I'm hoping to get through it this month as well. But Bishop Irenei is an archimandrite at the cathedral in San Francisco. And it's actually the cathedral where St. John of San Francisco in Shanghai was a priest and bishop there. And he is near and dear to my heart, and San Francisco is near and dear to my heart because that's close to where we live. I actually have a relic of St. John of San Francisco, and I brought half of that relic to Georgia with me to give to Meope. So I have a little story behind how I got that relic. So St. Herman of Alaska's monastery in Platina, California is just an hour from my house in Anderson, which is just south of Redding. And we visit St. Herman's often and are huge fans of Saint Seraphim Rose, who reposes there. And yes, I call him Saint Seraphim, not Father Seraphim. Something interesting about Saint Seraphim is that he is venerated as a saint here in Georgia. I've posted something about Saint Seraphim recently on our Instagram, and there was a little bit of pushback about it's really Father Seraphim because he hasn't been canonized. And something that a lot of converts don't realize is that canonization begins at the local level. And so if you ask the brothers at St. Herman's, they would say, yes, he's definitely a saint. And then in certain jurisdictions of the church, there are churches who already venerate him as a saint and have canonized him. And Georgia is one of those. So because I'm in Georgia, I can properly say Saint Seraphim. So St. John of Shanghai is actually who was Father Seraphim's spiritual father, and is the one who blessed him to establish St. Herman of Alaska. And St. Herman of Alaska Brotherhood is who published this book. So there's a lot of connection for me locally in terms of my connections to these people who were involved in this book. And so how I got the relic of St. John. So when St. John of San Francisco was canonized in, I don't know what year he was canonized, but when he was canonized, it happened at St. Herman's. And he was known for wearing these beautiful French blue cassocks. And French blue just happens to be my favorite color. So I feel connected to him because it apparently was his favorite color. And some of his cassocks after he was canonized were cut up and passed out as contact relics. And I inherited one of those contact relics through Punks and Monks from a parishioner, a friend of ours who reposed a few months ago. And his estate, all of the icons and books, Orthodox books of his estate were donated to Punks and Monks. And so that relic was part of that kind of donation. And so I cut that relic, it's about this big. And so I cut that piece of his cassock in half and brought it here to Georgia to give to Meope to add to his collection. He has a chapel in Holy Trinity Monastery that has the relics of over 3,000 saints. So I added to his collection and brought that to him.
Could you tell us a little bit more about Punks and Monks and Books? So while we're on, share with us about your business.
Yeah. So about 6 months ago, my husband and I and our children attend St. George Creek Orthodox Church in Redding, California. And Father Nectarios is our spiritual father there, and we are so blessed to have him. And about 6 months ago, he had actually had some atrial fibrillation and had been in and out of services for a few weeks, and we were all really worried about him and praying for him. And then the doctors realized that it was caused by low potassium levels. And so he kind of bounced back as soon as he started taking potassium supplements. He was back to his gregarious, hilarious self. And so that first Sunday that he came back, he was sitting at lunch at the agape meal, and I went over to tell him something, and I can't remember what I was telling him, but I vividly remember he was sitting in a chair and I was kneeling at that chair in front of him. I don't like to stand above priests. It just makes me feel like uncomfortable. So if a priest is sitting, I'll kneel down in front of them. And so I was holding his hand, and he said, "Michelle, I had a dream." "No, I have a vision." "No, I have a plan." And he said, "I want you and Basilios to open an independent Orthodox bookstore. And we don't really have a place yet, but we'll think of that." And he patted my hand in kind of his really loving, fatherly way. And he said, "We'll talk about it more later." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And we didn't know if he was like really back to himself, because he's normally like an Energizer bunny, but we were all really trying to be careful with him. So I didn't want to take up a lot more of his time and ask a lot of questions. That was really how it started, just that brief, 2 sentences. And so I said, "Oh, okay." And so I went back to where my husband and I were sitting, and I was like, "This is really interesting." And I kind of told him what Father Nectarius said. And again, I didn't want to bother him. I'm normally texting him pretty regularly, and we talk a lot, but I was still kind of trying to respect his time and his health. And so I didn't say anything, but in the background, my mind was just going 90 miles an hour about what he meant by that, and what that could look like, and how we could be a part of that. And so I did I'm a photographer by profession. I've been a professional photographer full-time for 10 years now. And marketing just happens to be something that I've done a lot of research and study and kind of implemented in my photography business. And so I thought, okay, if we're going to do an independent Orthodox bookstore, what do I want it to be like? And that day, someone shared, I'm trying to think of who it was that shared it. But someone shared a video on Instagram about a documentary about Father Seraphim Rose, and the beginnings of the ministry called Death to the World. And the title of the documentary was Punks to Monks. And I really need to find that documentary, because I just watched it once and I was just kind of off and running. So it encapsulated everything about Death of the World, which was a ministry that kind of came out of Platina And it was essentially two actual ex-punks or former punks. Like one of them was a founding member of the punk band that's still very famous called Sleep. And he became a monk at Platina, and his name is Justin Marlar, and Justin and I are friends. And he and another monk and a couple of other people in that area at the time, in the Northern California area at the time, started publishing Death to the World. And it ended up being a really incredible ministry that still exists today. And it was an outreach to literal punks of the 80s variety. And that really resonated with me because my husband and I both have kind of a ex-punks or former punks past. He was raised in LA in the 80s, which was kind of the United States seedbed of the punk movement. And then I went through a goth punk stage in high school and middle school and high school. And I still kind of have that, anti-establishment, death to the world, and love black and, combat boots. And, I still carried on some of that, even though I'm 45 and literally a grandmother. I brought my combat boots to Georgia and I wear them all the time. So I just thought that's a perfect name because it has like a certain ring to it that's catchy, and it expresses who we want to reach out to. Like we want to reach out to the furthest from acceptable society. I'm a really big sinner. Like I was a really big sinner, and my family was a really big sinner. Like my dad was a drug dealer, and my grandmother was a mistress to the president of France, and this is my third marriage. And I have a really a story akin to Mary of Egypt. And so we wanted to reach out, and I'm covered in tattoos. Most people in Georgia don't know that because I don't have them visible, but I'm covered in tattoos. And so we wanted to be an outreach to those kind of people, the Marys of Egypt and the Pauls and all of the whole, the people who would not feel comfortable walking into an Orthodox church alone. Those are the people that we want to reach out to. And my husband is a musician. So anyway, that was the perfect name that encapsulated what we wanted our ministry to be. And we wanted it to eventually be a bookstore, which was what Father Nectarios' dream was. But we want to have events like chess club and book club and, and have the monks from Platina come and do talks, and the monks from the monastery of St. John's, which is also about an hour from us, which is an OCA monastery, and the priests from our area, and all of the authors that have really impacted our lives in our walk in Orthodoxy. So that was kind of our dream, and we wanted to be kind of the way we described it is kind of a halfway house between the street and the church. And God has given us some really incredible opportunities to already minister to people like that, people that we've met online and people that we've met at monasteries that we visited in the United States as well as here. So it's been a really, and it's interesting now, now we've kind of, we feel like the Lord is, I feel like St. Michael brought us, who's my patron, brought us to Georgia. And there's some, reasons why, but we're very eager to see what God has for us here in Georgia now. I mean, he's blessed our socks off already, but we believe that there's some things in the future that he's going to continue to grow. So we'll have punks and monks in Georgia too.
Wonderful. Well, I so appreciate you sharing that story of you and your husband and your family's kind of travel into Orthodoxy and your hope for your ministry through your business. Let's talk a little bit about the introduction. And I did want to note, on the first page is a picture of the Cathedral of the Mother of God in San Francisco, where St. John served as a priest. And so let's start with the introduction and talk a little bit about what Bishop Irenei's intentions are with this book.
So I think it's so interesting that a bishop would say he cannot consider himself anything but a beginner at prayer. And that's comforting to me. And I hear the same thing from, Meope and Bishop Garrison, and Bishop Garrison and several other really pious, wonderful fatherly figures in the church. They have such humility, and that humility is so attractive. And I think that that's one of the things that attracted. I mean, obviously he was Christ, but I think that the man part of him, the humility in the man part of him, was a lot of what attracted, first century Christians to him and to his followers. And so when you see things like that, like a bishop who says he's just a beginner at prayer, it helps you kind of relax and breathe and be like, okay, so if he's just a beginner, then maybe I'm not so bad. Maybe I'm not so bad after all.
Yeah, I think Bishop Irenei did such a humble job, and I think that is reflective of strong leadership, is that humility. I mean, when you're looking for a leader that you want to follow spiritually, I mean, I think humility is there, and you can see that in Bishop Irenei in both the first introduction and then the additional notes to the second edition. And so, as you mentioned before, this is published by St. Herman Monastery Press, and so that's wonderful, a wonderful resource, and they have a lot of wonderful resources at their monastery. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about in the introduction or relating to Bishop Irenei?
One thing that some people may not realize is that he references on the bottom of the first page that 2 portions of this volume have been previously published in the Orthodox Word. I think a lot of people in Orthodoxy may be familiar with the Orthodox Word, but one thing that they may not realize is that was Father Seraphim Rose is the one who started the Orthodox Word. He's the one who initiated it, and it is still produced out of Platina by St. Herman's Brotherhood. So it is a really rich resource, and you can go back and read. You can also order old copies of it if you're interested in that. And then the last thing on page 8 of the introduction, he says, we write down words about that which in its purest form is wordless. So he's saying we're writing about prayer. And as Orthodox, as a convert, so I'm a convert, my husband's a convert, my son's a convert, we're all converts from Protestantism. And as a child and, growing up in the Baptist church and other Protestant flavors of Christianity, I believed that prayer was a conversation with words. And I've been Orthodox now for almost 4 years. And the longer I'm Orthodox, the more I realize it's not about words at all. Being in Georgia, every service I go to is 100% in Georgian. And when I first got here, it was, I was here for almost all of Lent, and the prayers at Holy Trinity are about 4 hours a day. And so when I asked Meope, what should my prayer rule be? Should I be reading the hours in English while I'm while the nuns are praying? And he said, no. He said, I want you to listen to the prayers like it's an opera. And my husband and I have talked about this, that going to a country or even to a church, there's churches like St. Anthony's in Arizona, all of the services are in Greek, and we've spent some time there as well. And one thing that we've noticed is that when we can't understand the actual words, it's sort of like our spiritual eyes are more in tune to what's going on the spiritual realm. And so I think that's what he's trying to say, is that we have to understand that prayer is not a logical, mathematical, linguistic exercise, which is what I thought it was as a Protestant. You say the right words, you express yourself verbally and make requests. And as my experience is not that's not really what prayer is about. And he talks about here, he says, we must all make a beginning, and though crutches may eventually be cast away for a time, they are necessary to help us stand. And I think that's what the words are, is crutches. The words help us to engage, but I think actual true prayer, and if you read anything about Joseph the Hesychist and Hesychism in general, that it is a uniting of your soul to God, a uniting of your nous to God, a uniting of yourself to God. And that unity doesn't require words. It doesn't require English. It doesn't require Georgian. It is entering into the presence of God. That is true prayer. But as we're beginning, especially coming from a Western mindset, where everything is linguistic and everything is explained and described with words, you need that to help you focus. I'm ADHD. And so the words are really important crutches for me, because if I wasn't thinking in a logical, linguistic way, I would be off thinking about what I'm going to make for dinner or, whatever. And we all do that. But I pray that as I grow in Orthodoxy and as I grow closer to understanding Orthodoxy and what true prayer is, that I'll need less words. And so that has been a lot of my 8 weeks here has been practicing that, praying without words, because I can't understand. I mean, now I can understand a lot that's being said, but, at the beginning, especially, prayer is not about words. It's about entering into the presence of God.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Was there anything else that you wanted to share about the introduction or about your time at the monastery right now? Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Just that we announced our first tour coming up, and we will be offering tours in the future to Georgia. We don't know how often yet, but this has been a life-altering experience for me, and I want to share that with others, specifically English-speaking Orthodox, or those that are interested in Orthodoxy, because Orthodoxy in the United States is still in its infancy, and Orthodoxy here is 1,500 years old. Saint Andrew is the one who established the first church here in the 1st century, and then Saint Nino of Georgia is the enlightener of Georgia, and she came and spread the faith throughout all of Georgia in the 3rd century. And so there's a richness and a fullness that I've experienced here in Georgia that I haven't experienced anywhere else. And I've been in lots of monasteries and lots of Orthodox churches in the United States. And it's not to any fault of anyone in the United States. It's in its infancy. And as Mayope would say, American Orthodox are neophytes. So we're just at the first level, and there's a depth here that you just don't find in the United States. And so we'll be just stay tuned to our Instagram and our Facebook, and we will be announcing more tours. And just as a plug for that, these tours will essentially be at cost. So this isn't a profit. This will be a nonprofit, part of our nonprofit. And it will be deeply enriching and very as budget friendly as we can possibly make it, and still make it an incredible, beautiful experience of Georgia.
Well, thank you for the missionary work that you're doing and welcoming other Orthodox to travel with you. Saint Nino is in the children's board book that I wrote for kids, God's Saintly Friends. Saint Nino, Saint Paris Havre, and Saint Salome, her 2 kind of disciples and fellow enlighteners of Georgia.
Yes.
Baby coming to me.
No problem. Oh, do we have a Bobo?
So we appreciate your time today, and we'll also post a link to the tour that you will be giving here shortly in Georgia for those who might have interest in that. So thank you, Michelle, for joining us today.
Of course, thanks so much. I appreciate it.